Chapter 1. I tried to ignore his masculinity, but the sight of his black skin intrigued me. Its appearance was intoxicating. I tried to pay attention to his words, but as I glanced into his eyes, each syllable dissolved into unintelligible sounds. What was he saying? He wanted my opinion on the opening scene of his screenplay. I tried desperately to hear him, but my senses refused to obey me. Instead, my ears only captured the texture of his voice as he spoke. Its sound was so penetrating and hypnotic, seducing me with its mere tone. I stared into his eyes. They were truly alluring, huge and brown. They were so soft and gentle. He was exhilarating. I wanted to savor his presence. His scent was tantalizing, forcing me to become aware of him, of his nearness. I couldn't resist wondering about him. Had he ever been in love? Did he know what betrayal felt like? I did. As I continued to observe his eyes, I wondered what type of man Nile Ngugi was. His name alone mesmerized me. Its pronunciation excited my mouth, gracing my lips with its sensuous sound. I tried not to notice his throat as he leaned over me to point to whatever was written on the page. I ignored his direction and instead found myself looking at the thick hair barely visible below the opening of his flannel shirt, which prevented me from seeing more, but I would have liked to. He had to be 6'9", or 26, or perhaps 27. I leaned more toward the latter age. His face was quite handsome. I loved to witness his smile because then I was given the chance to see his dimple and beautiful teeth. His laughs came seldom, and I found myself waiting for them. "Professor Adkins?" His words were registering. "Should we continue this at another time? You seem distracted." No. Please, go on." "Are you sure?" "Yes, continue," I said, directing my attention once again to the script on my desk. "What do you think of my choice in music for the opening scene?" "I picked this particular rap because I think it will emphasize the anger Thomas feels when he sees his cousin murdered. I think the energy of the instruments and the words will draw the audience completely into the scene." I hadn't heard the song, but I quickly read the lyrics. I needed to put the scene into its proper context before I spoke. His writing style never ceased to impress me. This man had talent. "I am not familiar with this particular rap, but I agree. The words are powerful. They give me a feeling of hopelessness. The cousin seems to be simply another murder victim in an increasingly long list of slain black men. And I get the feeling that if things don't change drastically, the main character, Thomas, will die in a similar fashion." "Perceptive," he congratulated. "It's a strong script, consistent throughout," I said, basing my opinions on his earlier drafts. "Why did you write this?" He deliberated for a moment, then said, "My brother was killed 3 years ago." He became quiet. The silence was painful. I could see the desolate expression on his face. He tried to stay composed. "Over Timberland boots and a gold chain." Don't be. I'm dealing with it. It hurts, but I have to survive." I covered his hand with mine and squeezed it gently. "I didn't mean to intrude on your privacy." "You didn't. I am going to have to talk about it at some time." "Was anyone called?" "No," he said, turning away from me briefly. After several seconds, he looked back. "No leads, no suspects. Just another open case among many. It shouldn't have happened. He was so young. He had so much potential, and now he's gone." "How old was he?" 15. Is that fair? A black boy can't even make it to manhood. I've got to change that. Make them realize that they are slaughtering each other. And over what? Name brands? We can't afford to be materialistic. The price is too high. I want them to see that, and I think this is the way. I agree. The film's going to be dedicated to Chad and all of the other black boys and men deprived of a chance to contribute to this world. I just wish I could have saved him. Oh, God, he said, shaking his head and looking up at the ceiling. His grief seemed to instantly overwhelm him. I miss my brother. He abruptly stopped speaking. I gotta go. He began to gather his papers quickly. I looked up in surprise. I didn't want him to leave, but I didn't know how to stop him. I could see he was still grieving. I also knew he was a private man. He seldom revealed himself to anyone in the class. His thoughts were always concealed. His views seldom expressed until he began the screenplay. I'm finished here. Can I give you a ride someplace? I desperately wanted him to say yes. I can walk. I grasped at anything which might make him change his mind. It would be no problem, and I know the roads are still treacherous. The snow is accumulating inches again. I'll be fine. I'm used to the weather. I really don't mind. I almost pleaded. He looked at me intently for the first time, almost as if he realized something. I wanted to look away, but I met his eyes with a stare of my own. I delighted in his preoccupation with me. He gave me a slight smile. Are you sure, Professor Adkins? Yes, I stammered. It's not that far. I can walk it. I'm only on the other side of North Philly, Susquehanna Avenue. I know how to get there. Let me get my coat, I said, jumping up with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. Was this a crush? I was 35. I didn't experience things like that anymore. I was too old, too mature, too intelligent. But still, he excited me. I gathered my textbooks and other resource material. I quickly stuffed them into my duffel bag. I loved teaching script writing, but sometimes I considered myself a perfectionist. I lugged tons and tons of reference books with me to each class. I never knew when a student would ask a question I wasn't prepared for. Therefore, I tried my best to anticipate everything. I pulled on my leather bomber and watched him zip up his winter coat. He draped a thick shawl over his head and around his neck. Then he slid on a pair of extremely thick gloves. His movements were slow and precise. He picked up his textbook and black binder from my desk. I enjoyed the way he moved, the confidence he exuded, even at such a minute task. Ready? He asked, glancing at me. If he caught me staring, he said nothing. He was truly a devastatingly attractive man. Yes, I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder and walking past him. I switched off the lights and released the lock on the classroom door as I walked through it. I held it as he followed behind me, and then I heard it shut.